Doctors Bauer, Arbib, Iacoboni, and Rizzolatti. Rizzolatti is the man who actually was in charge of the lab where they discovered the mirror neurons. They have written, each of them, entire books about mirror neurons, and there are probably more on the way. There is something truly fascinating about the discovery that there is an area of the brain, in the brain, that without any effort on our part, or even conscious awareness, automatically equips us to read the intention of another person by watching his behavior. This area simulates the actions and inner state of the person we are observing. On the one hand, it is truly exciting to see proof that we are equipped to intuit what is going on in another fellow human, and that the building blocks of the resonance and attunement that allow our intimacy with each other can be seen lighting up, even if it's in goggles, lighting up a magnetic resonance screen. We know so much more than we did even 10 or 15 years ago. On the other hand, we knew there was another hand coming. There is still so much we do not know about the clinical endeavor. And so let us be excited by this new knowledge, but let us also stay grounded clinically, echoing what Margaret told you. First, when I mention mirror neurons, they are obviously not acting alone when they allow us to feel this inner state, emotions, and all of a fellow human. Another area, crucial relay area, seems to be the insula, which seems to link the mirror neurons with the limbic system and with the brainstem and body proper, so that the function and rhythms of the body are integrated. In other words, as we learned in Bioenergetics 101, we still need a resonating body to be attuned and empathic. Second, the correlations that we see when a research subject does something and a neuroimaging monitor shows a change in activity in a brain area, these are only correlations. The two events are occurring at the same time. But this does not constitute a proof that one is causing the other. To get closer to such a proof, we would have to have the technical resolution to look at the activity of single neurons. The technology required to do this is invasive and unethical in human subjects, and maybe in animals, but that's another topic. Here is a description by Beatrice Beebe before motor neurons became so pervasive in clinical research of what she believes happened for her patient, Dolores, while Dolores viewed a video of a therapy process between Beebe and herself. In watching the video, Dolores discovered that I, Beebe, was seeing what she herself carried in her face and body and sensed about herself without being able to describe it verbally. Seeing my face, seeing her, and hearing my sounds responding to hers alerted Dolores to her own inner affective reality. She would find herself putting on my facial expressions while watching the video. By wearing my face, Dolores became more effectively aware of her own inner experience, presumably through the proprioceptive feedback of her face, as well as the feedback from various physiological arousal systems. That's the explanatory model they're using without mentioning mirror neurons. That's the end of the quote. And my comment is, I am not certain that knowledge of mirror neurons would have enabled Beebe to participate in the described mirroring process more effectively. Perhaps if Beebe had had a patient whose facial expression was quite frozen and whose limbic system was out to lunch, Beebe would have been sustained by the knowledge that her patient possessed neural hardware that, while it was dormant at the moment, was waiting to be quickened. So let me get really real with you now. Are you ready for this? And ask if our mirror neurons are so smart, why are we so often in the dark about what is going on with our patients? I'm speaking for myself. Why are most of us amused, amazed, and aghast when our patients tell us how important to them some offhand gesture or casual comment we made was to them? Often it was something about our humanity, the people we were before we became wounded healers, that the comment or gesture betrayed to our patient. Something we said as we opened the door. How much then can we ask of our mirror neurons? First of all, they and our limbic circuitry are necessary for our attunement, but they may not be sufficient. Some variety of them may help us to see into the mirrors of our patient's souls, but we still have to be able to tolerate what we see there in the mirror. We will not be relieved of the struggle to stay present with the patient when what they bring into the room is too intense, not intense enough, as in boring, or simply brings up material that is too uncomfortable for us. Second, we are a tough read. Ekman and Friesen studied facial emotional expression for decades, and they concluded that it is the rare person whose natural intuitive talent enables them to read what is on the heart and mind in the fleeting nuances of facial expression. Then, as Reich taught us, there is the patient's character armor. Whatever impulses and desires of our patient that were intolerable in his environment have been unconsciously defended against and disguised. Any specific gesture or posture of part of the body, for example, may be a complex compromise between core impulses, traumatic experience, and chronic defenses. Then there is projective identification, adding a layer of complexity to what the mirror neuron has to decipher. And finally, there is irony. In Irwin Yalom's wonderful book, Love's Executioner, it was the two ironic smiles of his patient that brought home to us the limits of intuition. Each time his patient smiled, the smile expressed such a nuanced and complex reality within her that no one could possibly grasp its meaning without knowing many interlocking details of her current and past life. So, it remains to be seen that these poor neurons can decipher the array of inner experiences that lead a person to smile or fathom. Why are you smiling? Sorry. If only I knew. To fathom the multiple contradictory levels of meaning embedded in character structure. What these neurons actually are supporting is our implicit relational knowing, to borrow that apt phrase from Karl Lyon's Root. So that kind of knowing is really a kind of not knowing in the left hemispheric sense. These neurons invite us to trust our intuition and dwell in the interactive space where what we know remains true only for a fraction of a second, or fractions, even as we feel our facial expression mirroring that of our patient. These neurons embolden us to listen more attentively to what comes to us intuitively in fleeting images, whispers, body sensations, or even fully articulated sentences. I wrote a paper some years back where I called this listening with the limbic system. As a bioenergetic therapist over the years, on a good day, I learned to quiet my mind and listen to my hands. On a good day. They quite often knew where and how I should be touching my patient before I did. Sometimes my hands and I both learned what we should be doing by watching what my patient was doing with his hands. which brings up the topic of whether mirror neurons and their life will change the way we teach our craft to our students. This is, of course, another question that I'm not going to try to answer now, other than to wonder with you if the ratio of explicit to implicit will change in our effort to teach expertise in reading the story of a person's body in the form and motility of their body. By the way, when I am trying to get a sense of what is actually going on in the moment in a session, I often explicitly ask my patients how they experienced what just happened. Philip Bromberg, a relational analyst, this is sort of a signature of the kind of work that he writes about in his books. So I ask them, and this is then a brilliant idea, except when it is a stupid idea, because of its potential to pull the patient out of an important experience for which they have no words into a premature left hemispheric derailment. How will we teach ourselves and our students when to speak and when to listen to the silence? If I was Paulo Coelho, I'd say when to listen to the wind, but I'm talking about something similar. A last point on what mirror neurons cannot do for us. They cannot relieve us of the burden of living through the shame, rage, and despair in the inevitable enactments with our patients in which we fail them as they once were failed, in which we participate as the old bad object, so that they can revisit the original traumatic failure and perhaps this time come closer to mastery of them. I think there's a sort of an implicit hope that we're going to just be so resonant, so attuned, and everybody will be happy and we won't have to deal with this other stuff. Here is a vignette which I believe demonstrates that the clinical encounter involves many more variables than can be grasped both by mirror neurons or, for that matter, Margaret could tell us more about this, but be included in an empirical experimental design. I think there are too many variables. So I am with my patient Marie, and the action which my mirror neurons are trying to attune me to is an attempt to express in spoken language. It's her attempt to talk to me about her sense of grief, about her inability to help her parents to move beyond their highly dysfunctional relationship with themselves and her. My mirror neurons tell me that her voice is quite strangled and that her words convey little of the unprocessed shame and rage, anguish that is trapped in the musculature of her neck and throat. These same neurons allow me to empathically feel Marie's trapped emotions in my own belly and heart, to the extent, that is, that I can tolerate feeling them. I have discovered via trial and error, primarily by asking this patient about her experience of my interventions, when I've been more ambitious about healing her in a little more quickly, I've discovered that it is most helpful to her if I sit next to her and stay with the burning ache in my own chest as she expresses her grief in the choked vocal timbre that comes over her at such times. I honestly do not know how much my bioenergetic training has improved on what my mirror neurons and limbic system tell me very directly about the emotions and the motoric act via which she's attempting to communicate with me. Her feelings are deeply entwined with a shameful, traumatic sense of herself as tiny, bleak, and unworthy of being known. So I understand that my steady, long-term commitment to witnessing and empathically accompanying her will slowly lead to a stronger sense of her worth and her ability to integrate and reflect on more of the traumatic material from which she has dissociated.